Good evening, welcome back. We are going to be summarizing Module 8 for Course 3, Lesson 1. And Lesson 1 talks about preparing to lease residential condominiums. So the key considerations in condominium leasing. A leased condominium complex differs from a leased single-owner unit such as a freehold house or rental apartment building because it has multiple owners, many of whom are also residents. Collectively, the owners can decide to upgrade and improve common elements and amenities. As a result, condominium units are often newer than traditional apartments and townhouses, with many technological features, attractive layouts, and energy efficiencies. But this pride of ownership can result in high maintenance fees. Moreover, the collective owners decide on the rules and regulations of the condominium complex, which can change at any time. These rules and regulations, which can include, for example, pet restrictions, schedules for use of amenities, and restrictions on types of leasing, and impact both tenants and landlords. Key considerations for landlords. Landlords need to consider how the multiple owner construction structure of condominium corporation affects their decision to lease. When determining rent, they need to factor in rising maintenance fees and special assessments because rent increases are restricted to the allowable rent increases detailed in the RTA. In addition, landlords need to be familiar with the rules, regulations, and bylaws and provide a copy of the document to the tenant. They must inform the tenant of all changes and take responsibility to ensure that the tenant complies with all rules and regulations. The landlord should also carry property insurance in addition to requiring the tenant to carry tenant insurance. During the occupancy period, when the complex is still under construction, landlord needs to be aware that leasing may be prohibited or severely restricted. The landlord should also take an interest in the operation of the complex by attending all owners' meetings and sending a proxy. Because many condominium landlords are investors, novice landlords, and absentee landlords, they need to be aware of the option to hire a property manager to take over landlord duties. So key considerations for tenants. Condominium tenants need to be aware that the condominium corporation have rules and regulations and bylaws that all tenants must comply with. These rules can include restrictions such as the need for the board of director approval for changes to a unit and the need to follow schedules and rules for the use of common amenities. Tenants have no voice in the operation of the condominium complex and can't attend owners' meetings. In addition, tenants need to be aware that guest parking, lockers, storage, and bike racks may not be included in the lease or may require payment of fees. Tenants need to be aware that if the landlord defaults on the payment of condominium fee, then the condominium corporation has a right to demand the fee from the tenant. In addition, they should be aware that there's a higher chance of being required to move since condominium units are often investments and may get sold during the tenancy. So that was lesson 1. Moving on to lesson 2. Ensuring compliance with providing services to a landlord or tenant. Services to a tenant. As a salesperson can show the condominium unit, the common elements, and other buildings to a prospective tenant. The salesperson can provide information about the unit, example the size, parking, storage, and lockers, and the common elements and amenities, the features, rules, and schedules. They can explain rules, regulations, and bylaws which could impact the tenant's use of the unit. They can contact the condominium corporation or manager to determine if the tenant is required to sign additional forms. Finally, they can help the tenant analyze rental rates for similar units. And then services to a landlord. A salesperson can contact the condominium corporation or manager to identify any restrictions or obligations the landlord or tenant must comply with. They can advise the landlord on current market rates for rent. They can attend owners' meetings as proxy for the landlord or enter into an agreement to provide property management services. Compliance and due diligence. So basically, a salesperson must comply with REBA and the Code of Ethics and provide due diligence to both prospective tenants and landlords. You must obtain correct and specific information about each condominium property, not assuming that all condominiums buildings within a complex have the same rules, regulations, and bylaws. They must confirm any restrictions on leasing the unit prior to marketing it. They must obtain a copy of the current rules and regulations from the condominium manager and confirm any pending changes to the rules, regulations, or common elements. They must ensure they know how to access the building, units, common elements, and other buildings in the complex for viewings. They must advise the prospective landlord to seek third-party expert advice on condominium-specific issues. Lesson 2 was easy. Moving on to lesson 3. Lesson 3 talks about compliance and management requirements related to leasing a condominium. So, roles and responsibilities of landlord. The landlord must ensure the unit is used for residential purposes if this is a requirement in the rules and regulations and bylaws. They must provide the condominium corporation with tenant contact information and copy of the lease and update them on all changes to the tenancy. They must pay the monthly maintenance fees throughout the tenancy. They must provide all necessary keys and fobs to the tenant. They must inform the tenant of updates or changes from the board of directors. They must ensure that the tenant complies with all rules and regulations and address non-compliant activity. If the tenant does not comply, the condominium corporation takes legal action against the tenant and or the landlord. The landlord must bear all the legal costs. They must arrange for all repairs to the unit, including repairs required by the condominium corporation. They must advise the tenant in advance of maintenance schedules that affect the unit or common elements. Roles and responsibilities of condominium corporation. During a lease, the condominium corporation is responsible for identifying when the tenant is non-compliant with rules, regulations, and bylaws, and informing both the tenant and the landlord. It must communicate information relevant to the tenancy to both the landlord and the tenant. They must keep track of which units are leased, and if required by laws, retain a copy of leases. Finally, a courtesy, condominium corporations may provide requested information to salespersons and brokerages. Roles and responsibilities of the condominium manager. During a lease, the condominium manager or the manager provider must maintain a list of leased units on behalf of the condominium corporation. It must implement decisions made by the board of directors that affect leased units. Moving on to lesson 4 is summary practice activities. Moving on to module summary. Let's see if we've missed anything. No, basically we've covered everything here in module 8. That's it for module 8. I will be doing module 9 soon. Thank you. I hope you learned something. Have a good night.